So did you catch how the Indian markets reacted to the budget announcements? It was kind of a mixed bag, right?
Yeah, it was a bit of a roller coaster, actually. I mean, the markets initially seemed underwhelmed by the capital expenditure numbers, and that definitely caused some ripples.
Right. That capex increase, the 9% for FY26, well, it didn't quite hit the mark, I guess. Economists were expecting more, considering the economy's current state.
Exactly. It was like they were hoping for a bigger boost, especially with the economic slowdown we've been seeing. Well, that's what they thought.
So the Nifty ended slightly down, but then the Sensex actually went up, which is a bit confusing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's like different parts of the market reacted in their own way. The Nifty mid cap took a hit, but the small cap actually did okay.
Mhm. So it's not just a straight up or down story, it's more nuanced. And what about those sector specific moves? I heard FMCG had a good day.
Oh, absolutely. The FMCG index jumped by 3%, and consumer durables and auto did pretty well too, up by 3% and 1.2% respectively. So there were some clear winners.
So that must be tied to the government's focus on boosting consumption, right? Like with that income tax change they announced.
Precisely. The government's move to exempt incomes up to 12 lakh rupees from income tax is, expected to boost spending, especially in urban areas, which is, I guess, exactly what they were going for.
That's a pretty significant change. It's like trying to refill the consumer spending tank. I mean, hopefully it will work out for them.
Well, they certainly hope so. And, the move should help sectors like FMCG, auto, and others that rely on consumer spending. Now, let's move on to the upcoming triggers for the week.
Okay, sounds good. What's on the radar? It's the RBI policy meeting, isn't it?
That's right. The Reserve Bank of India's rate setting committee meets later this week. And, analysts are actually predicting a rate cut, which would be the first in over 4 years.
That would be big. I mean, a pretty big change. So, how's that going to affect the markets? I mean, do we know?
Well, it's expected to have a positive impact, but it's all up in the air for the time being, especially with the new governor leading the meeting for the first time.
Right, that's Sanjay Malhotra. I remember reading about that. So we have the budget effects and the RBI meet. What else is going to be driving the market this week?
Well, another big one is Q3 earnings. A massive number of companies, 748 in total, are set to release their quarterly results. That's going to be a lot of data to process.
Wow, that is a lot. Any particular companies to keep a close watch on?
There are a bunch like Asian Paints, Titan, Airtel, and some big names like SBI, ITC, and M&M. So it's going to be a pretty busy week. And we also have some IPOs and listing. Next week is going to be pretty action-packed, actually.
Right. And what about the IPOs? Are there any new ones opening or listings happening?
So no new main board IPOs next week. It's a bit of a breather there. But we do have a few SME IPOs lined up. And Drar Agarwal's Healthcare Limited is going to be listing on February 5th.
Okay, so that's the domestic market stuff. What's happening globally that we need to keep an eye on?
Well, US stocks ended lower with the S&P 500 having its sharpest decline in 4 months, mainly because of losses in chip makers.
Oh, wow. Those chip makers are always making headlines, I guess. Any word on why they did so poorly this time around?
Well, there was some significant losses with Nvidia, Micron, and Broadcom. But, it just shows how interconnected the markets are.
So it is like a domino effect. And I guess we can't ignore the looming tariff discussions, right?
No, not at all. Global investors are definitely keeping tabs on those, especially with the White House reiterating intentions for new tariffs with Mexico, Canada, and China. And, that definitely adds some uncertainty to the mix.
Okay, so some volatility might be on the horizon. And what about crude oil? What's the story with prices?
Well, oil prices also ended the week lower, and that's partly because investors are waiting to see what happens with those Trump tariff threats.
Right, so I see lots of potential for market swings, given all this. Now, let's talk about the technical aspect of it. What are analysts saying about the charts?
Well, analysts noted that the Nifty showed a small bodied candle on the daily chart, which actually indicates indecision in the market. So it's a bit of a wait and see situation, I guess.
Indecision, well, that makes sense given the conflicting factors we've just covered. It seems like the market is, it's waiting to see what happens with those major things.
Yeah, it's like the market is trying to make up its mind. And all the announcements and events this week are going to play a big role in how things develop.
So, to summarize, we've got the budget reaction, the RBI policy meet, tons of earnings, IPO activity, and global cues all in play. And all this will, I guess, create a lot of market movement.
Exactly. It's a pretty packed week, and we'll definitely see how it all plays out. And it's a great time for our listeners to stay informed and maybe do a little extra research.
For sure. And speaking of staying informed, if you're enjoying this discussion, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insights into the financial world.
Absolutely. And we'd also like to remind our listeners that, disclaimer, we advise investors to check with certified experts before taking any investment decisions, as investing in the stock market involves risk.
Right. So that's all the main points covered then. It's clear the market's in for quite an interesting week. What are some of the takeaways you're seeing?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the markets aren't just reacting to one thing. The budget, RBI, earnings, global factors are all intertwined, making it a complex situation. It's kind of like a complex web of influences, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not just one event causing changes, it's a whole mix of factors, all happening simultaneously.
And I think another key point is that these developments highlight the importance of staying informed about both domestic and international events, because the world is so interconnected these days.
Definitely, the global markets are influencing our local markets like never before. It's like we're all watching the same show, but from different angles.
Exactly. It's like watching a global drama unfold where India is one of the main characters, right? And this week, I feel like we're all sitting on the edge of our seats.
So, what do you think about the future? What do you see happening in the market in the weeks to come?
Well, I think the coming weeks will depend a lot on the results of this week's events. If the RBI does cut rates and earnings are positive, we could see a rebound.
Right. So, it's all about the dominoes then. One thing affects the next. So, it's going to be important to watch carefully.
That's right. It will be an interesting time to watch the trends and see what happens next. It's like we're waiting for the next chapter in the market story to be written.
For sure. And we'll be here to discuss it as it unfolds. Well, that's our promise.
Absolutely. And until then, we invite our listeners to share their own thoughts with us. And remember to stay informed, stay safe, and we'll catch you all in the next episode.